Hey everyone, it's Kevin. Welcome to Doc's Comics. So, over the last few weeks, I've given you some tips and pointers about buying comics on Whatnot and buying comics on eBay. Today, I'm going to take it up a notch and discuss a little bit about the process involved and some strategies that you could take to actually buy comics on Heritage. Now, we know about Heritage, it's in the news quite a bit. It's a big auction house, it's intimidating, books are expensive, it's very, very fancy. You hear stories even in the news and in the media all over the place about gigantic books that are going for gigantic amounts of money. But believe it or not, you can navigate Heritage and you can buy books on Heritage. And as a matter of fact, there are bargains to be had on Heritage. So this video is going to explore strategies that you can use to find books that you're looking for on Heritage. And believe it or not, to get books cheaper than you might think. Now, a couple of things real quick before we delve too deeply into heritage. It is not for everybody. And if you fall into one or more of these categories, chances are you are not going to find what you're looking for on heritage. But let me go over this list real quick. One, heritage probably isn't for you if you predominantly prefer $5 books to fill holes in your collection. If you're looking for cheap books, if you're trying to fill gaps in modern runs, um, you are not going to find any of that stuff on Heritage. Heritage tends to be reserved for more expensive books, for keyer books. There's not going to be a ton in there for 5 or 10 or even $20. So if you like to dive in the dollar bins, Heritage ain't for you. Second, Heritage is probably not for you if you prefer your books to be raw. Yes, Heritage does sell raw books. Oftentimes, the raw books that they sell are in lots. Sometimes they're in mid grade lots, very good or fine, or something thereabouts, depending upon the age and the rarity of the book. But 90% of the listings that you're going to find on Heritage, regardless of era, gold and silver, bronze, modern, whatever, are going to be slabs. So if you're anti slab, if you want your books raw, you are not going to have a ton of luck on Heritage. And then finally, Heritage probably isn't for you if you focus your attention predominantly on modern books. Yes, there are a few modern books that are for sale on Heritage, but they tend to be rare. They tend to be super hard to find variants. They tend to be 9.8s and 9.9s are the bigger modern keys. So again, if you're just looking for kind of standard run-of-the-mill stuff that's come out in the last 15 or 20 years, you're not going to have any luck on Heritage. You're better off going to eBay or your local comic book store. So yes, on average, Heritage is relatively expensive, particularly when you compare it to other places where you buy books that I've mentioned in previous videos. But a lot of that is because they sell bigger books. Again, they're not selling the dollar books. They're not selling the $5 books. They're selling bigger books, keys, uh, older golden age, silver age filler books. All of those just tend to have a higher average cost, a higher average expense than books that you're going to buy at your average uh, local comic book store. Also take into consideration, and we'll cover this a little later when I get into tips, but they do also charge a 20% buyer's premium on everything that you buy. So if you buy a $100 book from Heritage, you're going to get $20 added onto the top. If it's $1,000, you're going to get $200 added onto the top. And then finally, their shipping is pretty expensive as well. And I'll also talk more about that later. But so you have to take the cost of shipping and that 25% buyer's premium into the final end price of whatever that auction has to be. And that's the total that you're going to pay. And it can be pricey. So, real quick, how does Heritage sell comics? Well, they do it a couple of different ways. They have weekly comic book auctions, and these tend to be on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Sunday, they offer Golden Age. Monday, they offer Silver Age. And Tuesday, they offer Bronze Age and later. So, modern books in combined with that. And they do these every week. And there's all kinds of different stuff on there. Usually nothing gigantic, but every once in a while, they'll put a very nice copy of this and that. And there's lower grade copies of the big keys, low grade Journey 83s, low grade Spider-Man 1s, etc. Then quarterly they have a signature auction, and these are the ones that you tend to hear about, and these are the ones where the giant books make giant sales and makes the headlines. They tend to be spread out over 5 days, and it's not just include comics aren't just included in it. They also throw a lot of original art in there as well, and they tend to stagger the auction. So at the very beginning, they'll have those platinum things, that Fantastic Four #1 and 9.0, for example, or a Frank Miller cover, or a Neal Adams splash page, stuff that's really expensive. And then it goes down a little bit. You get Golden Age comics and then Silver Age comics, and then they'll have original art and they'll do more comics. And the further down the signature auction you go, the less expensive the books tend to be. Similarly, Heritage also has original art auctions every Wednesday that you can check out. The original art market is a creature unto itself, and it's a lot different from the comic book market. So go into that at your own peril, but you can take a look at that stuff every single Wednesday. And then occasionally Heritage does have occasionally they have sales that are specific. So it might be a particular collection that they bought that belongs to one owner. It could be a focus on romance books or Western books or horror books or science fiction books, things like that. So there are a lot of opportunities to buy comics on Heritage. A lot of it's based on the scale, the amount of money that you want to spend, what kind of books you're looking for, but they are plentiful and they are available. So with this said, let's move into some of the tips that you can use to make your heritage experience positive and maybe even be able to buy a book or two. So you want to take a shot at buying a comic on Heritage. Great. First, there are a few little technical things that you got to do. You got to create an account. That account has to be verified. You have to have payment information on file because they will charge you, assuming that you win an auction. They will send you an invoice a few days after the auction is over. And once that's done and you're browsing through auctions, most of the weekly auctions, the ones that happen all the time, have about 600 items, give or take, through golden, silver, bronze, and modern age. And you can filter through. I like to filter through era because I'm predominantly interested in silver age stuff, and so I can filter out all the other things. Or you can do a keyword search as well. You can search for Superman or X-Men or Neil Adams or something to that effect to try to limit down the number of books that you're actually looking at. But honestly, it doesn't take that long to go through the entire collection of a weekly auction, and it's worth doing because you'll see some very interesting things there that maybe you hadn't thought of when you were putting your list together. When you're going through that list, when you're scrolling down the listings, jot down the ones that you are interested in. They do a really good job. Heritage does with their listings. I mean, you can look at pictures very closely. You can zoom in on them. You can see any little defect here or there. Now, to be fair, almost all the books are graded, so it's not quite as important than if you were looking at raw books. Excuse me, but you can see the conditions, you can see the grade, and probably the best part of the Heritage site is that you can look back at books that sold previously on their auction. So if you're looking at a 9.6 Hulk 181, for example, you can look back and see what the last one sold at and what the ones before that sold at. And it also will give you the dates that those sold so you can like see if something was bought right at the heart of COVID, for example, and the price is probably going to be inflated as a result of that. But it does allow you to see trends in sales and give you a better idea of what you might pay for a particular book if you're wanting to buy it. Now, like we discussed with eBay, probably the best thing to do, the best measure to take is to pick a price and stick with it. So once you browse through everything, pick a certain price on a book that you are interested in and write it down. For me, just getting into the technicals with myself, I prefer raw books over graded. That's a given. But a lot of the books, the majority of the books that they sell are slabbed, as I said. And so what I tend to do is I try to calculate a fair market value of a book that I'm looking at in raw condition. What does it sell for raw in that grade? And then that is the number that I tend to use as my ceiling. So if a book sells for, I don't know, $400 in 9.2 as a raw, that 400 is kind of my ceiling. I'm looking for bargains here. I'm not trying to overpay on Heritage. I'm not going to get caught up in the frenzy. I'm looking for things that I can get relatively inexpensive. So I'm picking that raw fair market value number. Then don't forget, what I do at least is then I subtract 20% from that number to take into consideration the buyer's premium that they charge on everything. So if you bid $400 on something, as I said, you're ultimately going to pay $480 on that. So what I do instead is take that $400 and then subtract 20% so that when they add 20% after the auction is over, it ends up being at that number that is my ceiling, that is my cap. So again, I'm looking for inexpensive books. You subtract that from the number to take the buyer's premium into consideration. as I told you, I am not overpaying. I'm patient enough to wait. Really, the only exception is that if I see a book on a listing on a heritage auction that I almost never see, that's an important filler for a collection that I'm working on. Then I might overpay a little bit, but again, as I've discussed on previous videos, I'm still not going to overpay. I'm not going to pay $200 on something that I value at $100. And so that number ends up being my maximum. Do not get caught in a bidding war on heritage. It is very, very dangerous. And my wife and I, we watch heritage auctions all the time, and we see somebody bid right at the last second, which creates someone else bidding, and then all of a sudden a book has gone from $2,000 to $4,000 in the matter of 30 seconds because they get in a bidding war and they get caught up in that gambling frenzy. It is really, really acute on heritage, so you have to be careful not to get trapped into that. Once that book hits your limit, let it go. All right, don't overspend, don't overpay, let it go. Trust me, most of the books that pop up, you're going to see all the time on heritage. You see a Spider-Man 129 every single week. You'll see a Secret Wars 8 just about every single week. So a lot of these books that are really popular that everybody's trying to get their hands on, if it doesn't meet your price standards that first time, just be patient because another one will likely come up the next week. Honestly, Heritage is pretty much the same as every other auction site that's out there. Just the stakes are a little higher and the books are a little more expensive. But the rules that you use on Whatnot, the rules that you use on eBay, you should use those same exact rules on Heritage and you should be just fine. I bought dozens of books on Heritage over the years, most of which are graded, and I get lots and lots of bargains. Just 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got a copy of Green Lantern, a Silver Age filler issue in a 9.4, and I got it on Heritage for less than the raw equivalent of a 9.2. So bargains are available. They can be had. And buyers are fickle. They're going to go after the hot thing and 1 week, and that hot thing's going to change to something else the next week. And so a lot of books that end up flying under the radar can and do often tend to go for less money than one might expect. One other thing that I'll add before I wrap this up is that the grade that you are looking for is going to have obviously an impact on how much you're willing to pay and how much over kind of fair market value that people are willing to bid. If you are after 9.8s, Heritage is not the place to buy it. I mean, here 9.8s go for exorbitant amounts of money, particularly with the big keys. And I've found that in my bargain hunting mentality that I try to have when approaching these things, that to me, now some of this is expense dependent, but to me, the sweet spot for grades is between an 8.0 and a 9.0. That 8.0, 8.5, 9.0 seems to be the area where there is the biggest opportunity for you to get bargains. Getting higher than that, 9.2, 9.4, and then going up into the stratosphere, I mean, people are just going to overbid for the highest grade copies that they can possibly get. Lower than that, there's surprisingly a lot of competition for mid and lower grade copies of keys as well. But right in that 8.0 to 9.0 area, to me, that's a range that has really good eye appeal. It still looks great. The front cover and the back cover, everything is clean. There's just minor defects that knock it down, but they aren't nice enough where those speculators and those people that have to have the best copy available, or you're not going to be competing with them. You're really going to be competing with other people who are trying to fill holes, who are trying to complete a run of a particular book, and there tend to be fewer of those, and that's where I find that because of that grading sweet spot, you tend to find the most bargains between a very fine and a very fine near mint, assuming that you are condition sensitive like I am, because I like to get as nice a grade as I can, but I'm not going to be able to afford a 9.4 or 9.6 on some books, and an 8.5 is perfectly acceptable to me. So I hope that that helps you if you decide to delve into the world of heritage. I hope you find some bargains. Please do me a favor if you're enjoying these videos. Please leave a like and a follow and a share. Check out my shorts that I post every day, and the next one will be up on Friday. So happy searching. I hope you find the books that you're looking for, and we'll see you next time.